I got to wear my Giants hat. We didn't expect them to be in first place, so I got to ride it while I can.
All right, welcome everybody to touring the AFC South. I'm your host, Mike Patton, and of course, a lot of things have happened in the AFC South. You know, with off-season movement, trades, hires, things like that. It's a lot to keep up with, and to be honest, it helps sometimes to get another source of information on the happenings in the AFC South. So I figured I'd reach out to someone that has elite insight on the NFL. He is one half of the Huddle and Flow podcast, as well as currently works with the NFL Network. You've probably seen his face on television a few times as well. And, of course, he's talking about all the information that he's privy to. Welcome, everyone, Jim Trotter, to touring the AFC South. How you doing tonight?
I'm good, bro. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you coming on. And, for those that aren't, very aware of how you got there or want to know how you got there, how did you get started in the business?
God, it seems like a lifetime ago, man. I knew I had an interest in being a sports journalist as far back as high school, but I never had an opportunity to work for my school paper because, there was a conflict of interest, me playing sports and then writing about my teammates. It just wouldn't work. So when I finished high school, I had some offers to play small college football, but I knew I was never going to go to the NFL. So my whole mindset was, let me go get prepared for, the ability to have a career. And so right away I started majoring in communications and then an emphasis in journalism, obviously. And my whole goal was to try and stay as close to the game as I could without actually playing it. And so ended up going, I had to save some money to go to Howard University. So I went and got my G's out of the way at Cal State. At that time, it was called Cal State Hayward. It's now Cal State East Bay. Transferred to Howard, got my degree there, and really just started working my way up. Started out in a small paper in Muskegon, Michigan for a year. Went to Tacoma, Washington for a couple of years. Went to the San Diego Union Tribune for 18 years. And then from there was on to Sports Illustrated, ESPN, and now NFL Network. So it's just been about grinding, man, and trying to do something you love and loving the game of football the way that I do. It's really been a blessing to be able to make a living at covering something I love.
Well, what position did you play, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I was everywhere, man. I was a wide receiver. I was a deep cornerback, and I was actually a kicker. I love kicking. Yeah, so, most people frown at kickers like they're not real football players, but I actually liked that part of it as well. So it was just those three things. I wasn't big enough for the pounding that you would take at the high school at the way we ran it. We were a run-oriented team, so we didn't throw a lot. So I wasn't necessarily big enough for that pounding we would take at running back at that time. I think I was 158 pounds soaking wet. And so, I just played out on the perimeter and loved it. So I wish I could go back and do it again, man. You know how that is.
Oh, man, yeah. The high school and college days. Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
I'll do without the bumps and bruises, but definitely the playing. Yes.
Yeah.
Now we talked about a little bit about how you kind of got into the business and everything. I know the big thing that everyone is talking about is about the new things that the NFL has put out about, vaccine and unvaccinated, things like that. For those that aren't aware, the rules could include potential forfeits for teams that have an outbreak with unvaccinated players. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you think this situation will go?
It's you can go beyond football here, and I would just say this whole thing is an unfortunate situation that I can't remember a time where so many people actually question science and people's health and what it means for people's health. And this whole discussion about vaccinations or unvaccinated, All I know is what the data tells us. And the data says that 90% of the people who are contracting COVID and being hospitalized are people who are unvaccinated. And while the vaccine doesn't stop you from contracting COVID, it does mitigate the consequences of it. So that's a long-winded way of saying, for me, I wish, it's just a personal opinion. Everyone can do obviously whatever they feel is in their heart and in their best interest. I wish people would be vaccinated, so that hopefully we could start to get back to a sense of everyday life where you can go out, where you don't have to worry about, is someone vaccinated, aren't they vaccinated, um, all those sorts of things. And in the NFL, as it relates to that, look, the league has made a business decision here that it feels it is in the best interest of its owners and its teams that players be vaccinated. And if you're not, um, and it can be traced to you that there's an outbreak that ends up costing your team the ability to play a game, they put in some pretty harsh penalties. They still haven't answered the question that I have: what if a vaccinated player um, infects the locker room and prevents a team from playing a game? Should that player not be subject to the same discipline as an unvaccinated player? So it's a, for me, it's a complicated issue. It's a multi-layered issue. Me personally, again, I wish people would get vaccinated. This whole thing about us questioning the science on this, the data says that we would be much quicker getting out of this thing if everyone were vaccinated. But there are just folks who don't want to do it, and that's their right.
I hear you. I hear you, Boo. Hopefully we'll see an end of this pandemic and all those things eventually. Hopefully.
Mike, truthfully, I don't know when that's going to be. It's sometimes I just wonder, can you go back to whatever? I always love when people say they want to get back to normal. What is normal?
There's not going to be another same normal anymore.
No, everything has changed. And for me, it's more about, I just want people to be healthy. I don't want to have to worry about if my mom goes into a place who has some underlying conditions, is she going to become infected and therefore it compromises her life or a family member's life or anyone else's life, for that matter, man. And that's why I say, if the data reflects that if you get the vaccine, the chances of you dying from it or being seriously harmed by it is so far removed from what it could be, I just wish people would get vaccinated. I truly do. But, everything in our society now is a fight, and you're on one side or the other. And truthfully, I don't have the energy to go out and try and convince people to do anything. Live your life. I'm going to live mine. That's the best we can do.
Right. I hear you there. Now, of course, we've addressed that and kind of went into that a little bit. Of course, we like to talk about, the teams in the AFC South and actually what's going on the field with them. And, of course, what's happened in the offseason. Of course, we got to start with the champions of the AFC South, which are the Tennessee Titans, of course. Of course, big news this offseason, trading for Julio Jones. And did you actually see that one coming, or did you believe that was going to happen? And when you saw the talk about it?
Yeah, I thought it was a possibility. Look, we knew the Falcons were going to move Julio, and it ultimately got to the point where Julio publicly said he wasn't coming back. So we knew something was going to go down. The question was which team was going to make the best offer to acquire him. So did I believe 100% at the start of that the Titans would be the team where he would wind up? No. Did I believe that they were always players? Yes. So so I wasn't shocked by it. The longer I'm in this business, the less surprised I am at player movement and in particular star player movement. The league is changing now, and players are starting to understand the power and the leverage that they have in terms of requesting and in some cases demanding trades. So I've kind of conditioned myself not to be surprised anymore, and you just have to flow with it. And look, I'm a traditionalist in the sense that there are certain players who are iconic players with a franchise that, in my mind, I would hope that they would never play for another team. You know, I was born in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area, followed the 49ers. Man, it hurt to see Joe Montana go put on a Kansas City Chiefs uniform, or to see Jerry Rice go over to the Raiders and then on to other clubs, you know, or to see Ronnie Lott, who's one of my all-time favorites, put on another team's uniform. But what we have found now is that if these players want to move, if they feel, you know, that it's in their best interest, they're going to take care of themselves. Who would have ever thought Tom Brady would play for another team? I didn't. You know, after 20 years in New England, all those championships, everything else, I could have never imagined that he would play for another team. And, you know, it's funny. I had this conversation with Larry Fitzgerald a while back where, you know, we were working on a project together, and I asked him about, you know, early in his career, he had a contract that was so player friendly that it really compromised the team. And there were a couple of points there where the club had to make a decision. Are we going to restructure him or assign him to an extension, or do we try and trade him? Because he had all the leverage based on how the contract was constructed, and it was not friendly to the team at all. And I remember Larry telling me that early in his career, he was fine if they wanted to move him, you know, and go play for another team. In his mind, it was a business, and you always put business first. But as he got older and after he got past a certain point with the Cardinals, he came to realize that his feelings had changed. And it got to a point that he didn't want to play for another team, even if he could have, which he could have in recent years. And playing for one club meant something to him. So I know that's a long-winded way of answering your question. No, I wasn't surprised. A little bit surprised that the Titans ultimately won the rights to Julio, but not surprised that he would be moved.
Gotcha. And now, do you think this move propels them closer to being Super Bowl contenders?
No, I don't think Super Bowl contenders. That's an interesting division from the standpoint of we just don't know how Carson Wentz is going to play for the Colts. And if Carson Wentz plays well as he did under Doug Peterson when Doug was the OC with the Eagles, then the Colts are a danger to play for the right to go to the Super Bowl. I still think Kansas City is the best team. But the Colts, if Carson Wentz can play at that level, they're loaded. I mean, they're good defensively. They've got a great offensive line. They have some issues, obviously, out of wide receivers. Some young guys have to finally step up and break through. But for the most part, they're a very sound, talented football team. So for me, Tennessee's got to get past it, you know, the division first before it can start talking about Super Bowls.
Now, one thing that a lot of people have talked about this past season was their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you know, they added Bud Dupree, they added Danico Autry from the Colts, got George Jenkins from the Saints. I mean, brought back Jam Brown, an inside linebacker. Do you think they did enough to make their defense better?
The interesting thing is that they brought in folks, but then they let a lot of names go as well. I mean, when you look at that defense. So they clearly believe that they could be better from the outside than what they had on the inside. Do I believe that they're better? Yeah, you know, I'm a big Bud Dupree fan. I know he's coming off the knee injury and whatnot, but I really love the way he plays the game and what he brings. They've added more, in my opinion. They're not star names, but they're solid NFL players. And so from that standpoint, yeah, I do think they're better defensively. And look, the reality is a defense's best friend is a strong running game. And we know the Titans have that. And now they have a passing game that's been elevated with Julio there to go with A.J. Brown and, you know, and Ryan Tannehill, who everyone used to dump on, has shown himself to be a very capable quarterback in that offense. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play without Arthur Smith there as their offensive coordinator and play caller now that he's in Atlanta. but I think they'll be fine. If I had to pick a front runner for that division, I would probably pick Tennessee because I just don't know about Carson Wentz at this point.
Gotcha. And the one thing I would say about that Arthur Smith does that a lot of people don't mention is he kind of created matchups. So like with the like when he created the matchup, remember against, I don't know if you remember, but when they were playing against the Bears and they lined up AJ Brown in the slot, kind of created that matchup with him and Buster Skrine, or I can't remember how you say his last name. But anyway, had him in the slot and he ran like he ran a fly pattern out of the slot to kind of match up with Buster Skrine. Is it Skrine or
I've heard it both ways.
okay. And he was, basically beating for a touchdown in the end zone. So, they're going to miss that portion of how he would scheme up things. They're definitely going to miss that.
But see, we say that only because we don't know what's behind him.
That's true, too.
We do that with players as well. When a named player leaves a team and everyone wants to panic, look, everybody gets to start somewhere. So, I'm going to wait to see what the OC does now offensively in terms of his play calling and whatnot. The other thing is, look, they have one of the better pass catching tight ends in the league, who is no longer there, who's now in New England. So how much does that offense change in terms of schematically some of the things they want to do? We know they're going to run the ball, but you have to believe now that part of their offensive philosophy too is going to push the ball down the field, knowing that you have a guy like Julio to go with AJ Brown. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And, truthfully, when you look at the rest of that division, you say Jacksonville, those should be victories. Houston, those should be victories. So they're set up now where the one team they have to worry about in that division is the Colts. And if they can win those games, and obviously, as every coach tells his team before the start of the season, the easiest road to the playoffs is to win your division. It doesn't matter what your record is. I've seen teams going at 7-9. I've seen teams going at 8-8. And I've seen those teams win games in the playoffs. So I have to believe Mike Vrabel is focused simply on the Indianapolis Colts right now and trying to win that division.
All right. Now, of course, you mentioned them already, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. And, of course, the big move was Carson Wentz. Now, what are you hearing about the relationship there between him and Frank Reich, and can they recapture the magic? Do you have hopes in that?
I won't rule it out. Look, I'll say this to you. I did not like the way that Carson Wentz responded last year to adversity. It was almost like he wanted to take his ball and go home when he got benched. And to me, I would have liked to have seen more fight from him. So the one thing he has, though, he has trust in Frank Reich. And they have obviously a good working relationship from their time in Philadelphia. So is he going to recapture his form? I honestly, there's no way for me to know. There's no way for any of us to know. If I had to predict, I think he's going to be better than he was a year ago under Frank. Because something that's important here, sometimes we forget players are people and relationships matter. And how you make a player feels can go a long way towards determining how he performs. And I think that Carson at this point feels like he's in a safe place. And the fact that he feels that, the fact that they have an offensive line that can protect him, and the fact that they can run the football tells me that he should be in a good situation. And I think that Frank, every place he's been in terms of working with quarterbacks, has developed that kind of relationship and chemistry with his quarterback that they have performed really well, even going back to his time with the Chargers with Phillip Rivers. So I do expect that Carson will play better than he did this past season in Philadelphia. But what does that mean? How much better? That's what we don't know.
Right. You're correct. Now, defensively, of course, they drafted Kwity Paye with their first pick to be the answer for their outside pass rush. Do you believe that he's kind of set up to succeed, or do you believe there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to be great?
Oh, there's a lot of pressure on him to provide an edge presence. Look, I love DeForest Buckner on the inside. He's a tremendous talent. He will occupy multiple blockers. So But I always get nervous when people put projections on guys who have never played it down in the league, you know? And the other thing is, it's hard for me if I don't see it in college, that type of production translate to the NFL. Um, so I'm cautious about that one. I don't know that it's going to be what everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but what the Colts and their fan base expect it to be. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on the young man. So I'm one of those, he's got to show me at this point, because I didn't see it in college to the level that I would say I believe that this guy, like when we saw Chase Young in college, you said right away as you watched him, man, he transitions to the NFL well in terms of being an edge presence. Can't say that in this case. So we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, I had some of those same thoughts that you had as well, because I watched a lot of his tape and I was like, I see him and I see the ability, but I just don't see it all the time. And I wonder if they can tap into that with the Colts or not. That's what I have questions about that too. Colts definitely are an interesting team, but another team that's got a lot of energy around them right now would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, we got Gardner Minshew talking about he hadn't taken number 2 in 2 weeks, which that definitely made me laugh a little bit. But there's a lot of optimism there with Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence, being there. What are your thoughts on this marriage between Lawrence and Meyer? Do you see it kind of melding together with what all they're trying to do there?
The thing I wrote, I had to do something with a storyline for each team coming into camp. And the thing I wrote about the Jaguars wasn't even about players. It was, how is Urban Meyer going to handle losing? Because they're not going to win right away. And I think, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so forgive me if the numbers are off, but as a college coach, I think in 12 years, he had 1 losing season. He had only
I was in Florida, I believe, too.
I can't remember exactly where it was, but he had 1 losing season in 12 years, I believe. So we know the NFL, he's going to struggle early because he's got to create a culture and he's got to bring in the personnel that he feels he can win with and all of that. My question is, how does he handle that? Because how he handles it is going to go a long ways toward determining what that culture is going to be in Jacksonville and how those players are going to handle it. And for instance, go back a little bit in history, when you saw Nick Saban with the Dolphins, he didn't handle losing well. And when I say handle it, I mean creating a culture in which your players feel that you're on the right path. That even though you may have lost a game, you are building towards something, positive.
Right.
And if a coach does not portray that, then players, they're not going to play for you.
That's true.
You're not going to be successful. And so and truthfully, that was a question I had about one of the questions I had about Kyle Shanahan when he went to the 49ers. He was known for being a very emotional coach, very quick-tempered. And my question was, even to people within the organization, how is this man going to handle losing? Because they're not going to win right away. And I didn't think he would handle it well, and he did. And part of that is because he had a general manager who really balanced him out well, who is more level-headed, if you will, or more cool and calm, I should say, and Kyle could handle John being the sounding board. He could take all of his emotions and he could put them on John and keep it away from the players, and then go to the players and then present that positive image that you need to keep building it. I'm interested to see how Urban Meyer handles this, because if he doesn't handle it well, he's not going to be there long.
Another thing also to kind of pair the 49ers and the Jaguars, Trent Baalke is now the GM.
Right.
Former GM with Harbaugh out in San Francisco, and we saw how that pair kind of went with the college coach becoming the pro coach. So
right.
there's already a little bit of symmetry there.
Yeah, I'll say this to you though. If you looked at Harbaugh's track record, he had never been anywhere longer than I think 4 years prior to going to Michigan. And some would say that there's a reason for that, that he grates on people, and he can be difficult at times, very emotional, um, has his own set of ideas. So in that case, when we talk about Jim and Trent, um, Jim can be tough to work with at times. I think Trent, what I have heard in terms of his relationship with Urban Meyer to this point is really good, and the two of them are on the same page. And in fact, when they offered the job to Trent, initially he wanted to take some time so the two of them could work together and that Urban could be sure this is the guy that I want there, that I want to work with. So, I have confidence that Trent's going to do well there. My question is, how patient is Urban going to be?
Gotcha. Now, speaking of patient, that Jags defense, I don't think he's going to be too patient if they play like they did last year. Couldn't stop the run, couldn't really stop the pass. Some would say that Derrick Henry was their boogeyman last year. So
he was a lot of teams' boogeyman.
That's true too. That's true, but especially theirs, theirs and Houston's. But do you think with the additions that they made this year that they'll be better? I mean, there's nowhere to go but up, right?
Well, see that you answered the question for me. People say it can't be any worse, right?
Right.
So yeah, I do expect them to be better, just from that standpoint. But again, Mike, it's going to take time, man. Whenever you bring in a new coach and a new system, unless you step into a situation where they've been stockpiling for years. So like you saw when Harbaugh went to the 49ers, or there's one other one I was going to mention to you as well. Ron Rivera up in Washington, where they had been stacking first-round picks, particularly along the defensive line. Unless you step into situations like that, it takes a moment to put your program in place. And it's going to take time for the Jaguars to get it right. But again, that's why I say it's important to have a sense or a feeling that everything is moving in the right direction, even if you are not. Look at Cleveland. Cleveland was stockpiling high picks, and talent for years. And now it's finally come together because they have the right coach and they have the right general manager. And there is synergy within that organization for the first time in a long, long time. But again, Kevin Stefanski stepped into a really great situation in terms of there being young talent there. And now some of the moves the Browns have made this offseason, to me, on paper at least, make them a real threat, to go all the way and reach the Super Bowl.
Now, I'm not going to tell too many of my Browns fans that I know that one. No, they're going to listen. They're going to listen. I'm just joking. But anyway, but, definitely, we've talked about three of the four teams, but we could not talk about the Houston Texans. Well, we just saw where, of course, Deshaun Watson reports, and of course, they're still talking about trading him. I know we didn't kind of go into this one, but wow, do you really think they get all of that for him? They want 5 draft picks and a combination of 5 high draft picks, and it just seems like a lot.
He's worth it. He's that good. He's that good. And there are teams that will be willing to give up an awful lot for him. I'm still curious to see whether or not he's going to wind up on the commissioner's exempt list.
That's what I've wondered as well. I've wondered. Honestly, I've thought, why is it taking so long to make that decision? I've thought about that one too.
Yeah, no. Anytime you try and predict discipline and why the league does what it does in certain cases, I have no idea, man. It's hard to follow. And the double standard in terms of how players are treated versus how owners are treated, that's another story for another day, because it's the hypocrisy there is mind-boggling. But I still say, ultimately, I do think he's going to wind up on the commissioner exempt list at some point. So he's not been charged with anything. He's not been convicted of anything. But as they say in the personal conduct policy, you don't have to be charged. You don't have to be convicted. It's up to the discretion of the commissioner. And the fact that they've been looking into this for so long and nothing has been determined says to me maybe they need more time. I don't know. But that's a bad situation in Houston.
I hear you there. Now, as far as Houston as a whole, they've got a lot going on. They've probably got the most guys on one-year contracts in the NFL. So
here's my thing about Houston. The guy that I feel really bad for is David Culley.
Right.
I did not know until he was hired, and we had him on the podcast, and just what a tremendous man, so positive. He's paid his dues, all of that. But as I said to him, and I'll say it here so I'm not speaking out of term, I believe he's just a sacrificial lamb. And I believe that ultimately what Caserio and Jack Easterby would ideally want is for Josh McCown to be the head coach of the Houston Texans. And once they feel he's ready, after David Culley takes all these L's, then I believe that they will promote Josh McCown to be the head coach. And I just think that's sad. I think David Culley deserves better. But, one thing we know about the NFL, it's not fair. It's a cold-blooded business. And you have to remember that it is a business. It's not a game. It's a business. And unfortunately, I think David Culley is going to pay the price for some really bad management that's gone on with the Houston Texans.
I'm just like, wow, the funny thing was I actually was cracking a joke about them interviewing Josh McCown. And then now you said about it makes a lot of sense now that I think about it.
I'm trying to think exactly how much I can say without betraying anything. I'll just say to you, I feel very comfortable saying that I would not be shocked if Josh McCown becomes the head coach of the Houston Texans in a year or two.
Gotcha. We'll leave it there. Now, another guy that's a guy that's coming back into the NFL actually after being let go from the University of Illinois is Lovie Smith, which I used to love watching his defenses. Wherever he went, his defenses competed. They played hard. They did everything. But of course, he's in Houston. He's kind of, he's kind of not being dealt a great hand. Do you think he can make some magic happen?
You're being kind.
I know. I was being nice. Do you think he can make some magic happen with this defense?
No. You win with players in the NFL, And that's the thing that always killed me when the Patriots were winning all those championships, when they won 3 out of 4 and whatnot. And people kept talking about Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick. And he's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach one day. But the reality is you win with players, and you have to have the players to win games and win championships. And even back then, that defense that the Patriots had was loaded in terms of these veteran players who were so smart, so talented, understood their roles and whatnot. In Lovie's case, same thing, man. You got to have players to win in the NFL, and he doesn't have those. And it's going to be tough on him, just like it's going to be tough offensively for them as well.
Yep, definitely. And it's going to be interesting because of, Tyrod Taylor there again. And, unfortunately, I don't know if he holds on to that starting job for that long either, because it's just the pattern of what's happened over his career.
Yeah, it just depends on if Deshaun is permitted to play and if they hold on to him for this year. For me, this if you were going to trade him, this was not the time to do it in terms of leverage,
right?
And what you were going to get from other teams. So that's why it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you haven't done anything to help your team for this year if you do trade him now. So I would be surprised if a trade were to happen during camp or the preseason, which is not to say that it won't, but I would be surprised, because I think your real leverage would come if he's allowed to play this year. Your real leverage would come in the offseason when teams are looking to upgrade.
Gotcha. Well, that's all I got for you. That's all I got. I'm out of questions.
All good, man.
But I just want to thank you again for coming on and giving us some of your elite knowledge that you have during your time.
Knowledge, man. Come on now.
I mean, it is elite. Not everybody can say
it in a way, because see, I'm just now. I had been on vacation for like 3+ weeks, so I'm just now starting to really dig in and start to do my homework as we get ready to go to camp. And so I feel like in some ways I'm not even as up to speed as I should be. So I'm playing catch up now. I'm taking off for New Orleans soon, but I'll get there. So I don't know how much elite knowledge I gave your audience, but hopefully it was enough just to be somewhat interesting.
Well, I mean, you gave us a lot of knowledge tonight, and I definitely appreciate you coming on. Can you tell us where we if people don't know where they can reach you, and then also any other things you may have going on?
Yeah, I'm at NFL.com. I'm on Twitter, Jim Trotter _NFL, and in terms of things that I have going on or working on, I've got some projects that I'm working on that we're just getting started on. We haven't even started, they're in the formative stage. So I don't want to say much about that yet because I don't want anyone else on them. But, the thing for me is what I'm trying to do is go places where not everyone is going, because I think in journalism too many times there's sort of a herd mentality. And, we just follow each other like in packs, one player to the next. And truthfully, with this pandemic, it's been kind of set up that way where you almost have to some degree, because your access is so limited in terms of virtual calls and those sorts of things. But for me, I'm looking for more human interest stories. I'm looking to show things that these players are doing in terms of their activism, and to help people understand who they are as people, not just as players. So, hopefully we can get a little deeper into that this year, because, I truly believe the longer you're in this business, you have to find where your passion is and what your purpose is. And for me, look, I've done game stories, I've done features, that type of thing. Before I'm out of this game, I'd like to do more of things that are really important, that shine a light on things that make a difference, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. And again, I did want to know when the podcast is the podcast coming back? When's it coming back? Anything there?
I'm gonna say to you right now, my guess is it's not coming back.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm still gonna listen to the other episodes and kind of, I guess, relive the moments.
I appreciate that. We appreciate everyone who was listening to it. So it's kind of disappointing, but one day the story will come out.
Gotcha. Well, again, thank you for your time. Everybody tuned in. This has been, of course, Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton, and of course, guest, Jim Trotter.